In 2023, Ed Mansell wasn't well. So he and his son Brian made a decision about the collection they'd spent years building. They'd consign it, hand it to a local store they trusted to sell it, piece by piece, and split the proceeds. The store was a Bricks Minifigs franchise. The owner, Crystal, welcomed them like family. And that number, $200,000, went up on social media to promote the display. Remember it, because that number is the first thing in this story that isn't quite true. The deal seemed simple. The store sells what it can. Anything unsold stays the family's property. For about a year, Brian came by every month, collected receipts and a check. Around $15,000 all told. A handshake between neighbors. That handshake is where every version of this story still agrees. After this, nobody agrees on anything. In November 2024, the company's corporate office terminated Crystal's franchise. New owners took over. The locks changed overnight, and the Mansell collection was somewhere inside. Brian came back 3 times, contract in hand. He says no one would recognize the agreement, let him inspect the inventory, or account for what was unsold. But the company tells a very different story. They say the consignment deal was never authorized in the first place. They allege Crystal kept, in their words, 3 separate sets of books, that she underreported sales and left the store insolvent, owing them nearly $200,000. They say that by the time they took over, most of the collection was already gone. So which is it? A theft? A cover-up? Or a messy business deal that collapsed and took an old man's collection down with it? None of this has been proven in court. And that uncertainty is exactly where things explode. Enter a YouTuber who called himself Reckless Ben. In May 2026, he picked up the Mansell's cause and turned a local dispute into a national spectacle. Millions of views, stunts, a fundraiser that blew past $400,000. The whole internet picked a side, fast. But here's the question worth sitting with. When the internet becomes the judge, is that justice? Or just a different kind of mob? Because online outrage can hold the powerful accountable. It can also burn down everything in its path. And so far, nobody had actually checked the math. After weeks of outrage, one of the internet's biggest scam investigators did the thing nobody else had. He redid the math. And the very first number to fall was the one that started it all. The $200,000 collection was never worth $200,000. By Coffeezilla's set-by-set math, working from the store's own inventory list, the real value was around $107,000. Even Reckless Ben admitted the big number was chosen because, his words, it was a nice even number that will grab attention. Here's what the records show. About $24,000 worth had already sold before the store changed hands. Brian was paid roughly $17,000, which means, on the night of the handover, about $82,000 of collection should still have been sitting in that store. Corporate said almost none of it was there. Just $2,000 to $5,000 of identifiable sets. Coffeezilla hired people to hand tag over 200 store photos from that night. Their count? About 21,000. 3 to 5 times what the company claimed. Then the register data. The point of sale records showed about $51,000 in matching sales. But the inventory sheet logged only 24. Some traced to nearly 100 items marked layaway. Some to a side deal with a single buyer. Piece by piece, he closed the gap, until only a small corner wouldn't close. His bottom line? Only $10,000 to $20,000 is genuinely unaccounted for. But, and this is the part that matters, he estimates Brian is still out somewhere between $50,000 and $83,000 for sets he was simply never paid for. Two things even he couldn't close. A U-Haul that appeared in a parking lot photo the night of the handover, one the company first said wasn't there, and an inventory spreadsheet the company swore was never sent to them, whose own hidden data said it was created on a company account. Confronted on camera, the CEO's response was simply, "This is the first I've seen that this spreadsheet was created by Crystal." Coffeezilla's honest verdict on those loose ends? This story still isn't fully solved. Here's the strange part. On a lot of the facts, the company wasn't wrong. The $200,000 figure was fake. They say the consignment was never authorized. They say the former owner kept 3 sets of books and left the store insolvent. And they did, repeatedly, offer to make Brian whole. So how did a company that was arguably right end up the most hated brand on the internet? Every time there was a calm door and a loud door, they walked through the loud one. First, they argued, publicly, about the dollar value of an 83-year-old man's life collection. Even when the math was on their side, the optics never could be. You cannot win a public fight about how little an old man's treasure was worth. Then came the decision that defined everything. They sued. Under a racketeering statute. And among the people they named was Brian Mansell himself, reportedly for $1.3 million. The son, the consignor, the face of the entire victim's story. And at the very same time, they publicly offered to make him whole and drop the suit against him. Coffeezilla put it more bluntly than I can. You are a Lego store. You're suing the man you say you want to compensate. Then they got a restraining order. Reckless Ben, the loud, relentless crusader, was suddenly forbidden to post or risk jail. Legally within their rights. Strategically, they just turned their loudest critic into a martyr. It backfired immediately. The CEO of Patreon publicly refused their takedown demand, saying, quote, "Bricks and Minifigs can stuff it." And while corporate and the crusader fought in court, the blast radius hit people who were never in the room. A store in Sacramento, 2 states away, got buried in threats and death threats. Their manager's words, "We are flooded with derogatory stuff, and we have nothing to do with any of the controversy." They filed police reports and closed for a week, just hoping it would blow over. It spread even further than that. Police departments with zero connection to any of this got so many abusive calls that it pulled them off real emergencies. And it reached a man who'd left the company more than a year before any of this began, the founder's own family. He says he received death threats and that someone shot out a window of his home. He had nothing to do with it. This is the part everyone loses sight of. Somewhere in the machinery, the actual question of what happened to one family's collection stopped mattering. The fight had become the story, and the people paying for it were the ones who were never in it. Maybe the company was right about the money. Maybe the records really were a mess. But you can be right in a courtroom and still lose everything that matters. Every door there was a calmer choice, a quieter call to Brian in 2024. A check instead of a lawsuit. A conversation instead of a gag order. They had every chance to just be a Lego store. And every time, they chose the fight. Strip away the millions of views, the lawsuits, the restraining orders, the math, and you're left with what was here at the very beginning. An old man, a son who just wanted to protect him, and a collection that, even now, even after everyone did the math, still can't be fully accounted for. Nobody really won this. Not the company that was sometimes right and lost anyway. Not the crusader who got the world to care, then got ordered to stop talking. And not the family at the center of it all, who, somewhere between a handshake and a headline, lost something that was never really about the plastic. It was about trust, and that nobody's been able to give back.